The images out of Gaza this week have been stunning as large crowds of Palestinians starving for food after an 11-week Israeli blockade on aid desperately scramble to grab what they can from the first truckloads that have been allowed to trickle in. It makes one wonder, what is life actually like in Gaza right now? Joining me now is Arwa Damon, who has visited the Strip 4 times since the war began just over 600 days ago. Damon is a former CNN correspondent who pivoted to humanitarian work and founded Inara, a charitable organization that provides medical and mental health services to children impacted by war. Arwa, welcome. So I'm trying to think of what's the best way for you to give us a sense of what life is like in Gaza. And since you work with children, how have they reacted to this unending war?
You know, we've seen different kinds of ways that this sort of, deep, intense trauma manifests in a child. And I think the starkest and best way to describe it is when you meet and see children that have quite literally been shocked into silence. So children go nonverbal. They are unable to process what it is that they're seeing, and coupled with the reality that the security blanket that a child would normally turn to, their parents, for protection, they know that doesn't exist. A child knows their parents cannot keep them safe, cannot feed them, cannot make their pain go away. And so you have these multiple traumas that are constantly hitting them all the time. And then add to that just the daily struggle of trying to stay alive.
So what does Gaza look like? When you go in there, what are you seeing?
It feels as if you're sort of in the opening scenes of some sort of bizarre apocalyptic Hollywood zombie movie. But then you realize in the middle of all of this, utterly dystopian scenery, people are actually trying to live in and among the rubble. There's little children who aren't wearing shoes, who are lugging, gallons of water that are heavier than they are. There's this one horrible scene of a father who's trying to push, his son in a wheelchair, and he just completely collapses from exhaustion. You have the elderly that are trying to crawl along because they don't have any other means of transportation. And it is so hard to comprehend how people are actually surviving. And there's one thing, Fareed, that I really wish everybody could see and understand, is the level of kindness and compassion and humanity that still exists among so many. It blows my mind. Because, we work in the same shelters over and over again. So the people there, they kind of, they know me and they know when I'm coming back. And the welcome that I get, the, oh my God, I'm so glad you're safe, which is stunning because, I've been on the outside. There's a level of kindness and purity that exists to so many people there that I don't think the outside world really understands or appreciates.
There are people who say there is a narrative that, look, it was put out by some Israeli officials at the start of the war. The Gazans voted for Hamas, they support Hamas, they celebrated after October 7th. What's your sense?
So if we look at a poll that was done by the Arab Barometer, actually incidentally just before October 7th, they found that if there in fact had been elections, the Hamas candidate would have gotten less than 25% of the vote. Add to that, Gaza's population is extremely young. So the vast majority of Gazans, more than 50%, were not even born or old enough to vote when Hamas came into power. Let's also remember that before October 7th, twice Gazans tried to rise up against Hamas and were unable to do so. And even if we look at the videos that came out, and I understand, it horrific. The scenes of, the hostages being pulled into Gaza and people around there celebrating, even if we're generous and say, how many people were in those videos? 5,000, let's call it 10,000, let's even call it 20,000. That's 1% of the population. I have not, in my 4 trips to Gaza, heard a single person support Hamas.
You say that if people knew what was going on, if the press were let in, the Western press were let in, the war would end tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I assume by that you mean that even most Israelis have no idea what is going on in Gaza.
No, and most people, because it is so impossible to describe. I mean, even when you watch it in the videos, even if you're someone who's watching the videos every single day, it's very different when you see it because the camera shoots straight and when you realize it's 360 around you. And add to that, a lot of the the narrative, we're targeting Hamas, we're not targeting civilians, Hamas is doing this, Hamas is doing that. When you're on the ground and you're seeing it for yourself, you realize that quite simply, Fareed, is not true. There is nothing about Gaza's landscape that says anything other than this is the annihilation of a population and every single aspect of what is needed to actually keep a people alive.
Arwa Dim, good to have you on.
Thank you.